Are we there?
It's loading. Now
Yeah.
we see.
We can see it.
That's cool.
Can
It's
you
like
see
a
it?
little part. Yeah, it's like a little part of the screen.
You don't see it as the full screen?
No, we
No,
see a bunch of
definitely.
people on the right.
Huh.
I'll text
I'm
you.
gonna try to go to slideshow mode, and you tell me if it works or not. Okay.
Okay. Are you there?
Yeah. Can you see it or no?
I see it on the left side of the screen. That's it.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it switching?
No.
No.
It's in slideshow mode, like where I can see the next slide in the top right corner. I can see all the other slides at the bottom, and then I see all the attendees on the same strip on the right.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I will not do slideshow mode. I don't. Next time we'll. No, we didn't.
Let's see. I'm gonna send it to you.
Yeah,
It looks like this. I just sent you a picture of what it looks like on WhatsApp.
Oh, I'm still presenting. Is it still showing my screen?
It's showing you up. You're presenting.
I show you your screen. Yeah.
Is this how it normally was?
I don't think
No.
so. I think it was bigger.
Yeah. What's happened? Is it something with presentation mode you guys have?
I don't know.
Huh. Turn captions on.
Okay.
Change layout. Full screen. Is that?
Maybe.
No.
Let's try.
Change layout.
There. Try the one on the right.
Is that one better?
Will it show your slides?
Are you? Can you
Oh,
see
yeah.
my?
Yes, we can see your slide.
Is that better?
It's
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, right. We can see the slide, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
No, Mame?
I mean, it's okay. It's
Yeah,
okay.
there's a way to, Mame, there's a way to change the layout. If you go to the bottom right corner,
Oh,
there's
okay.
three dots.
Okay.
You change the layout, and there's a layout that's center screen.
And that'll do my screen.
Yeah, that'll be
Okay.
your screen.
Oh, perfect. Okay. That's better. That's better.
So that should be better
Yeah. Yeah.
for you. Okay. Perfect. Okay. So today, so you can see the PowerPoint, right? You can't see anything
can.
else.
I can see the PowerPoint. I can see the words.
Yeah, we
and
can
the
see PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to maximize it as much as possible, but that's probably as good as it's going to get. Okay, so we're going to look at assessing this experiential classroom is sort of the topic for today. And so ultimately, the assessment starts with the classroom climate and the role of the instructor in setting the expectations. We're going to review sort of formative and summative assessments. And then look at how to assess for this experiential classroom.
So when it comes to the assessment, professors often don't think through what's happening, and you're going through just jumping right into the work. But students learn what they think they will be tested on, and this is noted by Biggs, who is huge in assessments in education, and he calls this backwash. So students are just going to give you, the professor, what they think you want. So assessment practices must send the right signals to students about what they will be learning and how they will learn it. So oftentimes there's a mismatch. This teacher and the student's perspectives on assessments are not aligned.
And so what you see happen is that as faculty, we come in and we're looking at our course material, and we initially think about what do we want the students to learn? And so what are the learning outcomes is the first thing we think about. And then the second thing is, what are these activities that we're going to do to build this learning outcome? And the final thing is kind of an afterthought. We think about how we're going to assess whether they've learned what we think they're going to learn. And so we think of assessments at the end. We bolt it on at the end of as we're developing the course. A student enters your course and looks at it exactly the opposite. They really focus and pay attention to the assessment. The thing that the faculty spend the least amount of time on is the primary focus, because they want to understand how they're going to get an A in the class. The second thing is they look at, what are these activities that I need to do to get an A in the class? And we'll just be generous and we'll say at the end, the students may consider what the learning outcomes are supposed to be. And so what we see is sort of reverse perspectives on how teachers and students look at the assessment process, which ultimately is quite critical in at least in their academic careers. But this misalignment leads to that backwash process where students are just taking shortcuts to give you back what you tell them that you're looking for. And so in the traditional way of teaching, we use a process called behavioralism. And what we do is we reward and sanction. Students are doing well, we reward them. Students aren't doing their job, we sanction them. And when you create a 2x2 matrix, you realize that the chances of getting it right are only 1 in 4. And so the idea is that the belief is that you can change behavior by properly applying reward and sanction. And one of the most common approaches in the US was the bell curve. And this is a true story. I walked into my class in the States in grade 10 when I just moved back there. And the teacher said, we teach on a bell curve here. 3 students are going to get an A, 7 are going to get a B, 12 are going to get a C, 7 are going to get a D, 3 are going to get an F. And I looked around the class and I said, well, those are the students that are going to get the A. So there's no need to try. And I looked at the students at the back of the class and I said, those are the students, I just need to do better than them. And you end up with this non-cooperative climate when you teach with a bell curve, you have a forced distribution. But also professors, and even in managing businesses, you often get the reward and sanction wrong. So someone who might be doing a good job, you might have thought that they weren't doing their job and you're sanctioning them, but in fact, you should have rewarded them. And so what you get often in this behavioralist approach to education from the student's perspective is just memorization. And you're asking students just to remember it, and they only remember the material up until they take the test. And one of the things I say in my entrepreneurship classes is that if you can find the answer in the internet, it's not the answer to how you can construct knowledge, because you end up with a lot of information. And so we want students to move beyond just memorizing the right answer to actually constructing knowledge of entrepreneurship. And so in the constructionist approach, instead of viewing the learner as this passive consumer of knowledge or passive accumulator of knowledge, it's often phrased as an empty vessel that we're going to fill up and they're going to backwash or regurgitate back to us what we want to hear. The approach is that there's a simulation. The student tries to make sense of these new concrete experiences. And so you're putting them in a situation where they don't know what the outcome is going to be. It's novel to them. And then the accommodation part is they adjust their beliefs about the world, in our case, sort of entrepreneurship, with these experiences. And so you end up striving for this transformative experience in students where they assimilate, make sense of these concrete experiences, and then they accommodate, they change their belief systems based on what has happened in that experience. And so, again, the idea with this constructionist approach is that you have students at one end and where you want them to be at the other end is what students can't do. And in between is fear. And we've mentioned this fear multiple times throughout these workshops. And the reason is that it's critical in that the role is of the faculty is to mitigate that fear and reduce the fear to a point that the students are willing to leap into the unknown. Because entrepreneurship involves uncertainty. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. But we know from our understanding of assessment in higher ed, the first thing that the student thinks about is how am I going to get an A? Because an A is, or a B or whatever that grade is highly impactful. In the US, if you get bad grades, you lose your scholarships, right? And so all of a sudden, these are high risk propositions. I have students at Harvard who get sponsored by their employers. If they don't get an A, the employer doesn't pay for the program. And so the students have to pay for the program out of their own money. And so what we're doing through this constructionist process, and we're looking at the facilitation, is we're helping students mediate the process as the individual interacts and makes sense of these experiences these novel entrepreneurial experiences. And part of what happens is that you as the faculty oftentimes have more knowledge than the students. And the idea is part of it is that you want to level the playing field. In other words, you're not the person with all the knowledge that's conveying it to them, but you're allowing them and creating the context that allows them to develop their understanding of the topic. And so as you're looking at the behavioralist approach in Bloom's taxonomy, you spend a lot of your time at the base looking at knowledge. You imparting knowledge on them. And then we assess for comprehension. And then ultimately at the end of their undergraduate career, we hope that they are able to apply it somewhere. And then the idea is that they then get to this analysis, synthesis, and then the evaluation. And so behavioralism has a very structured pyramid of how knowledge is imparted to students, with a lot of the focus at the bottom of you're giving them the knowledge and wisdom that you have. In the constructionist approach, it's flipped. The pyramid has these three-legged foundation, where from the beginning, the students are creating, they're developing and testing their assumptions, having these concrete experiences. Then they're analyzing the components of this experience to see what worked well and what didn't work well. Their own experiences, but also that learning cohort, the other students. And that allows them to evaluate, to make conclusions based on the evidence of their concrete actions. This allows them to apply that experience to a new context. And so as I was talking to a colleague yesterday, the idea is that when they have these concrete experiences in entrepreneurial marketing, when they take a marketing class, they can point and say, oh yes, I had a challenge with my product, or the placement, or the price, or the promotions. And that allows them to apply it to this new context. Ultimately, this foundation allows students to understand, or sense making out of these multiple experiences. And so we're not looking for a one and done experience, but it's this iterative process in which every week they're developing and testing assumptions. And over the course of the semester, they have this body of experiences that then they can connect, recall, and improve the self-efficacy. And there's really no substitute for these multiple iterations. We all know in entrepreneurship, it's a lot about iteration. But in the teaching of entrepreneurship, there's actually very little iteration. And so what we want to do is intentionally structure the class to have these multiple iterations. And we're going to look at how to assess this on a weekly basis to ensure that we get the behavior, the construction of behavior that we're looking for. We want the students to start constructing their understanding of the topic of entrepreneurship. And
so in listening over the last number of workshops, some of the things that we've heard from your faculty included students are passive learners and will not engage in the learning. Concrete real world experiences are time consuming and take effort to develop skills. Problem solving is too hard for my students. Students are not motivated to work on their ideas for a semester. Instructing and facilitating a class is hard work for me. Reflection and skill building are hard to develop, and I find it hard not to give advice. So those are some things that we've heard over the past workshops. So now we want to move to the open concept of growth mindset. The assumptions of the students' capabilities can prevent learning from students. So we need to work with that and change that. Just in like John was talking about in the constructivist approach. So students become active and self-directed learners that engage in problem solving, collaboration, cooperation. This is the teamwork. And through this, you're going to see woven in here those skills that are missing that are needed for real world and leadership. Number 2, students develop work ethic for their own idea and venture through real world action. Students will engage in the problem solving, especially of their own idea for a venture. Students develop motivation by working to grow their own idea from helping others, working together, and learning as a cohort. In turn, learn communication skills, time management, and empathy, all very important for entrepreneurship. Next, students learn self-efficacy as they grow through the course. This increases because of that facilitated action that you will be doing as a professor in the class, that becomes student approached and very supportive of their learning and their own making meaning. Next, students become reflective on learning from probing questions on their action-based class experiences, allowing for adaptability and actions. Finally, facilitators do not give advice because student entrepreneurs need to construct their own knowledge. This is where the real inner core of the promotion of self-efficacy comes from, and that you will facilitate that.
And so when you're comparing sort of a fixed and a growth mindset, when you think of a challenge, students that have a mixed mindset tend to avoid these challenges. And what we want to do is get them to embrace these challenges that they're going to face. When they face an obstacle, they give up. And I'll see this all the time, that students will be paralyzed with fear. And what you want them to do is have them persist. When there's effort required, they think it's fruitless. And with the growth mindset, you see the effort as a means to an end, a path to success. When you're thinking about discussions and criticisms as they're presenting their idea, fixed mindset, but also ineffective entrepreneurs ignore the feedback. So many people have seen, you've dealt with entrepreneurs and you're talking to them and they are ignoring it. But when a student has a growth mindset, they reflect on that criticism and learn from it. And this is why we had a whole module just on reflection. And part of this element in the classroom where we're looking at the assessment, if there's other people to achieve, if the students have a fixed mindset, they feel threatened by the achievement of others. But yet if they have a growth mindset, and if you create a climate, everybody feels inspired by others, by the success of others. And the results plateau early, don't achieve. If you have a mixed mindset, this is, I'm a B student, that's the best I can do. But if you instill this growth mindset, students continuously strive to reach higher goals. And the view of what we call the world view in a fixed mindset is deterministic. This is the example I gave earlier where my brother-in-law said, if it was such a great idea, somebody else would have come up with it. And what we're instilling in them in these entrepreneurship classes is that individual agency. The student has the ability to change and make a better product, a better company, a better community, a better society. But it all sort of starts with this individual agency of the student has to take the initiative. And that is not possible if we instill students with sort of this deterministic fixed mindset. So how do you, I'm going to unshare my slide for a second. How do you cultivate this growth mindset in your classroom? Husna, who would like to go first?
Dr. Anis?
No, I mean you.
Oh yeah, me?
You're a professor as well. You thought I was going to have you call on somebody, but I'm calling on you.
No, I'm not a professor.
Yes, you are a professor, aren't you?
No.
You're a doctoral
I'm not.
student.
Yeah, I'm still a student.
Yeah, well, teach the professors how to instill. You bridge the gap. You're a student. How do you create a growth mindset?
How to cultivate growth mindset?
How to create a growth mindset in your classroom?
Let them speak. For me, let the students speak their ideas.
Perfect.
And then the facilitator, like the lecturer, should listen more to their student, what they want to say, and then don't judge what they are trying to say.
Don't judge what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, perfect. So what else? That's a strong start. Who else?
The Anis.
Okay, I coach the students, it's like not instruct them in the class. So I'm taking approach coaching rather than instruction. So they explore their ideas and I will give feedback on their ideas and motivate them to pursue their ideas.
So how do you motivate them to pursue their ideas?
We sit down and they talk and everybody give support by giving ideas to make it happen.
Okay, so you talked about everybody. So it's not just you and the other student, it's a group of students. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It's a group of students.
Yeah, and so the idea is that the students can help each other, give each other ideas on how to move it forward. So I want you to call on somebody else, Anis, that can help build on this.
Satish.
He's not here. He just left a few moments ago.
Azua? Azua is here?
Azua is here.
So hi, I'm here.
Hi. Don't talk too fast.
I'm gonna talk too fast. So actually, Prof. John, the thing that you have mentioned earlier about the growth and also the fixed mindset is one of the things that we already taught our student in one of entrepreneurship subject here. But in terms of how we encourage our student to develop a growth mindset, I think it takes time because some of our students, they are a little bit shy in terms of expressing their opinion. So maybe it is because of our culture here, because we are a little bit shy. It's not about a student only, but sometimes we as a lecturer a little bit shy. So I think one of the things that we do encourage our students in terms of expressing their idea, how to develop their growth mindset, is just speak up your opinion, spill over and tell everyone about your opinion. So there is no right. One of the things that I always told my student in my class, there is no right and there is nothing that is not right. So you can speak anything that you want to speak, but make sure it is just something that logic and it is something that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And so part of it is that there's definitely cultural differences, and
Yeah.
Mayman, Lisa, and I were talking about how over the course of these workshops, you as a cohort became much more willing to participate, and so you have to work with that element, right? In that cultural differences impact how comfortable people feel participating. And then the other thing you had mentioned is that it's not easy.
Yes.
And part of how do you mitigate that how do you overcome that uneasy that it's not easy? I'm not going to get you to answer. I'm going to get you to call on somebody else
I'm
to
going to call
answer that.
another person here. Let's see. Dr. Satish already here. So maybe Dr. Satish can answer.
So how do you overcome creating a growth mindset isn't easy. Creating participation is easy. How do you overcome that? How do you encourage students to participate? Go ahead.
Dr. Satish, right? So I'm going to call another person, right?
You get to call another person.
Okay, Dr. Satish is here.
Yeah, that's
The one that really active here. He's not a passive person.
No, not that active. All right, good. Professor John, what?
Dr. Satish, please unmute.
We can't hear him. He's frozen.
Hi, Dr. Satish.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
All right. Okay. So what I will do in my class is I make them to be more comfortable in the class, especially try to make a two-way communication. So that's the first thing what I will do to overcome their fear and so on in the class. And then try to do more like fun activities. Try to make some jokes to make them feel more comfortable in the class. And
Okay.
that's the
So for
you
you being a comic is part of who you are, right? You're very animated. You're that's really quite comfortable. And so for other people, you have to be true to who you are. And so if you're not sort of this person who can make comments, I'm very self-deprecating, so I don't like making fun of myself all the time.
Okay.
But regardless of your personality, you are able to create this facilitation. And so he said something about comfortable. So does that mean bring in some nice sofas so people can lay down and sit comfortably? Is that what you mean by you make them comfortable?
No. What I mean by comfortable is like, they have to be relaxed first, to come up with some ideas.
So you need a hammock. You want a hammock.
Yeah, usually what they do is like when they come to the class, they be like very like strict, they'll be like so fearful and so on. You understand what I'm saying? So I have to
give me
make
an example how you make them feel relaxed.
Yeah, like I will ask, like first I will start like just asking like their names, where they're from, and try to engage with them first of all.
So the idea is the engagement part, and it doesn't really matter if you're asking them their names or why they're taking the class.
It doesn't matter. Yeah,
you want to engage and show that you care about them as individuals, that they're not just numbers in the classroom who are sort of obstacles between their secondary to why you're there. Okay, anybody else want to add something else? Who do you think wants to add something else? You need to call on somebody.
I need to call somebody. Yeah, sure. I can do that.
Wait,
Can I?
Yeah, Dr. Raihani, yes, go ahead. You
Okay,
can do that.
I just want to share what I did in my class. So I just provoke them and make them give their own idea. Okay, because when we provoke them, so they will start debate and show their interest. And at the end of this class, all of my students, they will go with a smile on their face. Okay, for example, okay, they said about, okay, they need to promote the product. And then I ask them, okay, so I start to trigger, and then I ask how to promote your product at the street with your neighbor. So when I ask this question, so they feel comfortable and they start engage and throw out their shine. So they feel that there are no gaps between me and my student. So they feel comfortable. That's why how I trigger and provoke them to ask or give any idea.
yeah, so excellent. So the element is that they need to feel comfortable with you, that you're engaging
Yeah.
with them, but also you identify probing questions. Like at the end, we're not their friends. We're, if you want to use the coach guide, we're guiding them on this journey of entrepreneurial construction, right? And so part of that provoking, that you use the word provoking, is having them think about, move beyond sort of, I'm going to market my product, but you were like, I'm provoking you, I'm triggering you to come up with something concrete that you can actually do. So you move away from the hypothetical, the theoretical, and you're like, what are you really going to do, right? As opposed to stay in the, and so part of that engagement, and it's a gradual process. The easy part, or somebody said earlier, it's not easy. And I would just, it's simple, but not easy. I agree with that. It's just, part of it is you need to unlearn to relearn. And so we have a process of training for trainers, and we spend, and I said this at the beginning, faculty are what we have to retrain. Students are ready. And once you adopt this back in February, students will respond unbelievably. But faculty need to relearn how entrepreneurs learn, because everything we've been taught in the behavioralism might give us comfort, but in fact kind of might ultimately undermines the creation of entrepreneurs. Okay, excellent discussion. So we're going to continue on. Wow, there's so many processes in it.
Dr. John,
Yes,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, how to facilitate a class where the students are not entrepreneurial? How to make an entrepreneurial student to become more entrepreneurial?
Well, that's the whole idea with the growth mindset. And we're gonna we often ask the wrong questions.
Like,
we often ask questions, how entrepreneurial are you, as if it's a scale, right? And we often look for traits of entrepreneurs, and we'll look at successful entrepreneurs and say they were these traits, and therefore those are the traits we were trying to build in entrepreneurs. But in my experience teaching entrepreneurship, every student, even the accounting and finance students, I was just speaking with an accountant yesterday, have a way and have identified wicked problems that they're trying to solve, right? So remember, the definition of entrepreneur is that there's a problem and the entrepreneur is able to come up with a solution. And so I've never met a student that doesn't identify a problem that they want to solve, and they use the class to try to solve it. So students are entrepreneurs in different ways, but through that, on the DIME model and the virtuous cycle of entrepreneurship, right? So if you look at that 5-step process that we're going to look at coming up, they have to come up with an idea. And so a student that's not entrepreneurial, my experience is that a lot of that is the fear. They've never been pushed to that bounds of, you got to try something that you don't know the result of. And a lot of it is how we're socialized and how they get assessed. And then other students are in your class and they already have existing businesses, they've started businesses, and so you end up with this very different level of entrepreneurial experience. And so what we assess is their learning journey. And so I've had students this past semester, I'll give you some examples. I had a student who was struggling, this is at an undergraduate level, and it took them a couple of weeks just to get brave enough. And the assessment that I used was getting them out of, they had to test it. They realized that they had to test their idea or they were going to fail the class, right? And so that is part of the assessment. You actually have to go to try to do it. And we have the student in our Harvard class who took the tool, did it to a problem that he had at work, and in half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, they were able to make $50,000 a year. And he said the bigger part of it, the more exciting part, was that it relieved an awful lot of headache from his work, because it was, and so at various different levels, they have the capability. And so your job as a facilitator is to get them to be entrepreneurial in the way they can be entrepreneurial. And one of the things that happens is that you can't compare them, right? Because I've had a student in my undergraduate class make $1,000 with the dollar challenge in the first week. And I've had students who struggled to make $5, $10. And if it's just a measure of how profitable it is, I would have lost them. And I think somebody talked about it earlier when or maybe I'm doing some workshops in a different place as well, but they were saying that it was vicious rivalry, right? Who said that?
Yeah, one of the professors here.
Who had the vicious rivalry where they were all complaining about each other?
I think it was his class, Dr.
Wasn't it?
It was in here. It was somewhere in here.
Was it you, Sathi? Who was it that had this and they were complaining?
Competition.
Yeah.
It was a gentleman, and you're the only guy with the screen.
No,
on, so
no.
I think it was you.
That was Muhammad.
Mohammed, yeah.
Yeah,
He
he's not
created
here
this
tonight.
rivalry where the students were competing against each other, and the students that made the most money got the A. The students that made the second most money got a lesser reward. And inadvertently, he created a vicious rivalry in his class. And what you want to do is create collaboration, cooperation, so that when the student succeeds, it's not perceived to the other students as detriment to them. So you can win, I can win, and we can all win together is what you're trying to create. I guess Mohammed isn't here. Not here? No. Okay. So we're gonna go.
No.
Any other questions? Do you have the screen? Is the screen up, Mame?
Yep, it's up now.
Dr. Satish, do you have a question?
No, I don't have. I'm just thinking. Like John was telling about the competition, right? Like competition in the class, within the class. So I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
Question,
So we're
go
going
ahead.
to look at how to create collaborative and cooperative classroom.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Part of what I do is create a cohort model. And so within the class of 30, 50, 70 students, they work together to build up. And they're not working against each other.
Professor, oh, there you go.
What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, John. What if the student has a fixed mindset, like they don't want to collaborate with another student?
Well, when you look at that discussion we were having, right? And you as a facilitator have to probe those questions. And so
Okay.
when you ask a student, how could, let's say a student has presented on their business, and you say, we'll pretend Husna has a fixed mindset. Husna, how could Mohammed improve his business? Right? What would you do differently to improve it? And so you're framing the question in a way that because of your authority, she has to answer. And you're assessing her on the quality of her answer.
Mm.
So if she says nothing, there's nothing they can do. You're like, what do you mean there's nothing? There's nothing they can do? And your follow-up question, and you don't give them a pass, right? But you meet them where they are, right? If they are really timid, you look for that one, they could do one little thing, right? And then it's like, great job. And then you have somebody build on it, right? And that's what I was trying to do with the example of the fear, right? They're afraid or it's not easy. I move from one person to the other person. So it's not easy. And then you ask somebody else, well, how would you overcome the fact that it's not easy? And so that one student who has the fixed mindset,
Okay.
they can see that their answer, what they might have had inside, they gave a little bit of the nugget that other people in the class built on. And then you can come back to them and have them summarize it or restate it. And all of a sudden, everybody in the class, by this interaction and facilitation, feels part of the solution. And then but also what I do is I give a student a pass. Like if you call a student and they really don't know, and they're struggling, you can see that they're struggling. You're like, what I do often, if there's good camaraderie, I say you can call on somebody else to help you answer the question.
Get them to participate.
And so sometimes they'll call on their friends, and sometimes, and at least in a fun way, they're participating, even though they've just called on somebody. And then you can go back to them and say, do you agree with that? Would you add anything? And so it's this back and forth that you guys had mentioned about creating the climate. And it's a lot of your role is creating the interaction. And one of the things is that it's not simple, as you can tell from your experiences doing it. It's not, but once you figure it out, this is the beauty of it. It appears seamless. It seems to the students that it's this organic development of the idea, but you're actually setting up the context behind. And they at the end feel fully engaged in the topic. Any other questions before I present for the fourth time? I have lots of time.
Yeah. Still thinking.
Because that's what we need, right? The way you build knowledge is it's always you need to spend the time. You always have to spend the time. Go ahead.
Professor, I was just going to kind of repeat something that you said, or foot stomp something you said that was really helpful. And I know some of you professors in the room have had participation woes, if you will, or problems, or kind of like, okay, everybody's quiet. Nobody knows what to say. So I thought that was a really golden nugget, what Professor just said about, hey, give them the leeway, give them a free pass to call their friend, give them free pass to call the smartest person in the room to help them with formulating. Because sometimes we don't know what to say because it catches us off guard, and you don't want to say the wrong thing and appear stupid. So I love that piece of nugget.
Yeah. And so give them a pass. Like, you don't want to become adversarial, right? And it's definitely important to give them a pass. And one of the things that Maine does in my TAs, and I think all you guys said you have TAs, right? Is in my undergraduate class, I have a TA, and they're just tracking participation. And I got this from when I did my Harvard case study. And what they're doing is, it's not in a negative way. What they're doing is helping you keep track of who said what. And what it does is it allows you in your next class to intentionally include, because we want to build an inclusive classroom. We don't want to focus all our attention on the 5-10 best students. So if you identify who's not participating, there you go. It allows you to call on them at the beginning of the next class and to develop strategies, right? And so this is the participation from, that's how she keeps track of the participation from the Harvard class that we just finished. And so one of the easier things that you guys have, which I don't, is that you have the ability to pronounce each other's names much better. So I would have called on you, but every time I call on you, I feel really bad because I butcher your names so bad that no one even knows who I'm talking about. I'm talking to Muni Ra, but nobody knows who that is. Everyone's sitting there saying, well, that's not me, right?
Munira.
Binti.
Munira. Easy.
Munira.
Munira.
Yeah. And the challenge I have is English is my second language, just like yours. So that's my excuse. I don't know what your excuse is, Lisa or Maine, but my excuse is English is my second language. Where did it go?
Is Munira there?
She
still on
disappeared.
Oh, she's there.
Where is
She's
she?
on mute. Binti. She goes by Binti.
She goes by Binti.
Munira.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No worries.
No worries.
Oh, so
You ready?
Before we proceed, I wrote down some notes listening to this discussion with Professor John and Mame and the rest of you. Some things to remember from the past workshops. Number one, what Professor John said about the students are ready. We can't forget that. We are making an assumption that they're not ready. So we have to remove that fixed mindset. So the students are ready. They can't look at you as the person standing in the front.
Keep going.
And that the very first week is the week when you set that tone. Okay, so don't forget they are ready. With regards to that, you have to remember they're coming from many classes that are theory-based and traditional-based, so they're not used to participating and action and experiences and bringing that back to the class. But we can't use that against them. That's the part that we have to facilitate. Okay, and the other part about listening to this discussion is that from the very beginning, when Professor John outlined the DIME, and we've used their iterative, what's the cycle called? The virtuoso cycle. This cycle is set up for you so that the class can be facilitated around this. So there's tools to use that enable you as the professor to facilitate the class, and the probing questions will come when you use the tool. And the other really important part to consider was brought out in today's workshop earlier, is that there is such a mismatch between what the professor wants to deliver for the class through the assessment and what the student's perception of the assessment is. Yesterday, I spent an hour talking with a doctoral student who was having this very difficult trouble trying to figure out how to take the theory that she has learned throughout her doctoral program. She's coming to the end of her program, and she's like, I'm so scared for the classroom because I don't really know how to do anything but regurgitate theory to my students. And so we have to remember that a lot of professors don't have the teaching and learning behind them that that happens in other disciplines. So facilitating a classroom takes time. It takes time to learn the little probing questions. It takes time to engage. It takes time to learn how to, a person is shy, but you don't want to forget about them. You have to come back to them, because DIME and entrepreneurial learning is all about experiences and being active with those. So we have to really facilitate that with the students. So that's just a little recap about what I was hearing during that discussion, which was very good. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. So learning assessments, why is an assessment different for action-based learning? So when you do an action-based learning assessment, the assessment requires students to use the same competencies or a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that they need to apply in a criterion situation in professional life. And in this case, it's for practice, for an entrepreneurial practice. So for DIME, this is an assessment of real life skills using real world tasks of entrepreneurship in and out of the classroom. And there's 3 core concepts that we use for this, and that is learning by doing, learning from others, and working together. So how can I assess the students on their individual learning entrepreneurial journey? And so this is really important, is like what Professor John was talking about. Each student is on their own learning journey, and we should not have a competition, and we should not compare them as much. So the instructor must assess the individual's learning growth. So that's individual. Real understanding is performative, which echoes the constructivist view that learning changes students' perceptives on the world so that they behave differently. So Biggs is huge in higher education, and he really does know what he's talking about when it comes to assessments. So a good learning assessment has a number of things. And first, it's valid. It must be valid. It must measure what it's supposed to measure at the appropriate level in the appropriate domain. It has to be fair, is non-discriminatory, and matches expectations. It has to be transparent. Processes and documentation, including assessment, briefing, and marking criteria, are clear. Reliable. Assessments has to be accurate, consistent, and repeatable. Feasible. Your assessment has to be feasible. The assessment is practicable in terms of time, resources, and student numbers. And finally, the educational impact. Assessment results in learning what is important and is authentic and worthwhile. Okay? So when you turn that around, we're removing predetermined outcomes. Such thing as for the DIME experiential entrepreneurship learning. We're removing mentors, case studies, articles of successful entrepreneurs, guest entrepreneurs, business plans, business models.
And so part of the reason that we're removing guest speakers or business plans or articles is that we want to avoid the hero narrative. And inadvertently having an article on a successful entrepreneur, having a successful entrepreneur come into your classroom, is that instead of bridging the gap, the students often focus on they've accomplished so much that I am incapable. So we disempower them. And then often students also look at and say that what they created is so complex that myself as an individual student, as a first-year student, do not have the capabilities. And so those things, the research shows, are detrimental. Again, the business plans, business models are oftentimes focus on the ideal versus how entrepreneurs actually start. And the last one is that we don't focus on simulations because I believe life is too exciting. Reality is too exciting. And this learning journey that the students are going to go on, there's no predetermined outcome. And it's much more exciting to watch them create something than go through a simulation that there's variables, but it's all predetermined.
And just on the reality is too exciting, if we go back to think about the South Korean video of where the entrepreneurs were interviewed, and you can tell the reality was very exciting for the entrepreneurs. And so bringing the learning forward and letting them construct the knowledge is so important. Empowering and bringing on self-efficacy. And just yesterday talking with the doctoral student who I spent the hour talking with, and how to get rid of the theory part. And just like in this, the theory is unknown. It's more empowering to start with some sort of an experience, and then they can relate to it and talk about it, reflect on it, and learn things about the theories afterwards. Then it means much, much more. Go ahead. Okay, so for assessments, there's two types of assessments, and I'm sure you already know this. I'm just going to do this for review, but formative assessments, so you're monitoring the students' learning to provide feedback. It identifies the student's strengths and weaknesses, and it allows for the professor an opportunity to iterate instructional material or see where they might want to change something. So this is happening, the formative assessment is happening throughout. Whether you do it, some people do it weekly, some people do it bi-weekly, but it's happening throughout the course. Go ahead.
And so even though, you know, I'm even making iterations. So in the summer course that Mayim and I taught, because of some timing issues, I had to make some changes in the formative assessments. And then I actually didn't pay attention to the impact that had on the summative assessment. And so, you know, so I ended up with a little bit of turmoil with some students were unhappy with how the course was being weighted because of the online component. There was some material that I wasn't able to cover, which increased the weighting. And so, you know, you're always making these iterations. And then that goes to that transparent part of it. You need to be transparent and be transparent early so that the students understand these changes you've made and how the changes are altering the assessment.
I think John was the learning in the class was just so real and so exciting. He forgot to switch his summative assessment at the end. I think that's what happened. But for summative assessments, so you're assessing effectiveness of most important learning, the reactions on the instruction, and benefits on the long-term base of what they're learning. And it shows learned knowledge, skills, attitudes, and motivation to be an entrepreneur. So this brings in another new term that I'm not sure if you've used before. Working with some people, they've never heard it put this way before, but entrepreneurship is practice-based. So your assessments need to become practice-based. So if you're going to learn entrepreneurship, you need to practice it. So the word that Biggs used for such practice is called performance. So you're assessing participation in and on experiential activities revolves around the actual students' practices related to developing their idea, venture, creation, or entrepreneurial activities of an existing venture. So it's really moving beyond just participation, that somebody answered a question, but you're going to see their performance and their growth. So that's what we're assessing. All right, so setting assessment expectations in the syllabus. So I've been in workshops before where, again, it's like working with a doctoral student yesterday where they just don't have the educational background to set up the components of what they want to happen from the beginning of the class to the end of the class. So here are some just practical things to be aware of. Many of you are already aware of these. So you need to be explicit of the expectation. So in the syllabus, the class outline, first day of the first week, you need to review this. As needed, remind as needed, and ask questions the first week and the second week. For people, have your students review it, make sure they've, the questions need to come early from your students about the syllabus. Participate, perform, and engage in real world action. Next, you want to clarify actionable expectations for assessments as real world actions of the DIME process. Okay, so marks are based on honest work, ethic, effort. Okay, number 3, encourage time, effort, and reflection on the workbook tasks and actions. So like I said before, this is available for you to use and creates the work for the class, the DIME model. So you want to relate time, effort, and reflection to real-world entrepreneurs in formal learning and use examples of students from the class. Okay?
And so that's the element of the cohort model, right? And so you're not bringing in students from previous semesters. You're not bringing in students that are finished the process to a freshman class. You're creating that through the cohort model.
Because students always want examples from somebody who did it before them. But because entrepreneurship is so much based on them constructing their own individual process to make something innovative and unique, that is not what we want to be doing here.
And so I'll just add, so that happens in my Harvard class. Mame can attest to it. They're always looking for examples. It also happens in my freshman class. And the idea is that this is what happens. If you give them an example, everybody starts copying the example, and the quality of the work goes down because remember, they're thinking about what's the least I can do to get an A in the class. And if you give them a best practice, everybody gravitates to that. And so you end up with less creative ideas, less work effort, and just less entrepreneurial learning because everyone's just copying somebody else's example.
So that's that word authenticity. The authenticity leaves the room when you use best practices, and that's definitely not what entrepreneurship is. So you also next will go to high quality feedback to support self-directed and reflective learners. And so one very important component of this is the peer-to-peer feedback. And because of the age group of the students that we have now, this peer-to-peer, as I brought in earlier in learning how to learn entrepreneurship, is very, very important to this age group. And we need to facilitate this in the class. And the high quality feedback is happening in the class. It's not something that you really need to sit down and rewrite over and over and tell students. It's happening in the class, and it's real.
And so part of that, this is one of the bigger challenges that you'll have, is that there's a default by today's students of not wanting to give critical feedback. And so they might say, that's a great idea. And your job in the facilitation is to dive deeper and unpack it and say, explain what is a great idea. What about it is a great idea? And what about it wasn't such a great idea? And so you're forcing the peer-to-peer feedback to be impactful because you don't want it to just be the default, oh, it's a great idea. It's really about helping them unpack what was great about it, what wasn't. But once you get it going, it works quite well.
So next, encourage positive motivation, self-efficacy through the DIME process. Facilitate positive learning from experiences, success through failure using the cohort experiences as your foundation. So again, using the DIME, which you have, will really enable you to do that. Encourage interaction and dialogue around learning, peer-to-peer and instructor, which I already mentioned, but you're encouraging students to see you for extra coaching and construction of knowledge as needed. And those students will become clear who they are, and they will also seek you out because they want to do well on their own idea. Remember, there's that motivation of their own idea. Okay.
We had a good comment in the comments.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just now. Is it bin Mohammed? Do you want to elaborate?
Muhammad is here.
Yeah, Prof. Yeah, Prof. You were talking about sincere reflection just now, and then yeah, I just would like to comment a little bit on that, especially yeah, based on my experience that when one students try to give their reflection, and then we started, okay, what do you mean by that? Can you explain a bit more? And then other students will like, oh my God, he start diving. I mean, he start trying to, you know, extract things for more information. I'm not going to answer next. So how can we avoid that kind of situation?
So you're saying that when somebody's answering, they're talking too much, other students don't want to participate?
No, he's saying the
No.
opposite. He's saying if you start asking a student a question, everybody else starts to shake in their boots, wondering, am I next? And especially if they see that person struggling, giving their answer. How do you help out the person that's struggling to
I think
be more
I think part of it might be the way that the question is being asked. And so we're going to look at that here coming up, right? And so what you're really looking for is really at the foundational level, having them remember that the 6 steps of reflection, just have them narrate, explain what they did, right? So you're not challenging them on their return on investment and their marketing plan. You just explain what you did. And so at a very base level, everybody should be able to explain what they did. And then slowly you move up to the evaluation. And then, you know, if they're struggling, one of those early elements of reflection is emotion. And so how did you feel? If they're struggling and you can tell they're nervous, ask them how they felt. And why did you feel nervous? I was scared, I was nervous. So why did you feel nervous? And they're, well, like, they might say, well, I didn't know anybody was going to buy my product, or I didn't know how to make it. And then what you do is you pivot, right? You're like, okay, who else felt nervous? And you, as you scan the room, you can tell people that you get a sort of a sense, and you're like, and then you call on somebody. And so those are the 2 elements. Number 1, or maybe 3, think about how you're phrasing the question, and then initially just ask them to do a narration, really basic of what did they do. And then the probing questions are, give me more concrete examples. If they're struggling, they're really emotional about it, ask them how they felt. And they don't realize that you're taking them to a higher level of reflection. They actually think that you're being empathetic. And then pivot and ask other people how they felt. Who else felt nervous? And no one's going to raise their hand and say, oh, I felt nervous. You just call on them. And if the person says, oh, I didn't feel nervous, the question becomes, why didn't you feel nervous? And they'll explain, well, I didn't feel nervous because I did it last week and I was fairly successful, or I really liked Make Me My product and I knew who I was going to sell to. And then you use that, the person that's a little more confident, to give advice and help the other person that was struggling. So how would you help this student be less nervous? And then all of a sudden, this cohort is creating confidence in each other, versus you saying, don't be nervous, because that doesn't mean anything. You are viewed as an authority figure, and therefore it's easy for you to say not to be nervous because you're the professor. It's much easier if if a fellow peer says, this is what I did to alleviate my nervousness. You can try something like this. And then the student that was nervous has that individual agency. They always have the option to take that advice, to ignore it, or to modify it, right? And so there's no point that the other student is telling them what they have to do, right? Because we want this intrinsic motivation, and they have to apply it to their context. It's always a little bit different.
I will always say things like, great, you're allowed to be nervous. That's how real entrepreneurs have learned. You're allowed to feel that way because other entrepreneurs have gone through this process. And so trust in the process of what I'm putting you through, and you will learn to mitigate these feelings and mitigate your fears. Remember that fear complex, that arrow in the middle, is so very real, especially for the group that we're working with. And everything on a phone, an iPhone or a Motorola phone or whatever phone you have is like. So they're not used to going deep. Our goal, one of our most important things we can do is help them plunge through that process, forget about and they need to go step by step deeper. There are feelings, there are fears, there are, we're helping them mitigate risks. So in the classroom, it's okay. It's okay to feel that way. I mostly work with international students. And so I understand that there are cultural differences. And sometimes I can have someone from Latin America and someone from China in a classroom. And at the very beginning, it's always very quiet. But by day 3, it's like people want to start giving their input. And then someone else builds on that. And then someone else builds on that, you know, and by week 2, you know, they're lined up outside the door to come in, whereas other professors, students are not coming to class because you're allowing them to get agency and construct their own knowledge. And this is what entrepreneurs do. We need to bring that, we need to remind them of that, you know, and it's okay. It's okay to be shaking in your boots in the classroom. That is allowed.
And so part of one of the things that Maine will attest to that I say, and this is even master students, there's some people who are, not this semester, the previous semester, I had a CFO of a Fortune 500 company. And I have undergrads, is that I say, trust the process, right, Maine? Trust the process. And Maine is very good at supporting that. And so you have to realize that for them, it's a new way. And they want to engage. They just, and part of the assessment is that they need to feel confident. We need to separate success or failure in the class from success or failure in the business idea. And once you successfully separate those two, the learning that occurs is phenomenal. If those two are interlinked, what you end up with is students giving you back what they think they need to give you to get an A. And so separate those two. And so I will say it again, for faculty, it is extremely challenging because there's an element, especially the first time, after faculty have taught this, the second time they feel more comfortable, the third time you'll never go back. I guarantee you, if after doing this class, teaching this type of class 3 times, you'll never go back. But the first time, you have to expose your own vulnerability. You have to essentially go to the classroom over the first couple of weeks and resist the urge to tell them what to do and to tell them how to do it. And to say this, in the back of the textbook, we all know this, the back of the textbook that we buy has the grading rubrics and has all the right answers. Right? And those PowerPoint presentations that we get have the right answers at the back. And we need to move away and trust the students that they will construct a different answer. And you end up being truly humbled at the end of the semester of how much better they were able to develop their idea versus if you kept them in the box.
And the great thing about having your students in the classroom like this is that this time that you have them is their time to build their entrepreneurial learning and build their skills. Whereas if they were outside of the class and they were on their own trying to do an idea or build had an innovative ideas, they wanted to build on it, it would take a lot more effort and extra time. You're actually giving them the time in this classroom to do it. So we don't want to waste that time. And so once the students understand that real entrepreneurs have to find, let's say they have a day job and they have an idea, they have to go find other people to talk to at some point, right? And bounce their ideas off of and talk and get peer critical feedback. And you have them in a class, here they are, they're to use this time wisely. They get to be very inquisitive and you get to ask lots of questions and help them unpack all of that learning.
Prof?
Yes.
Prof, I have one question.
Go ahead.
Okay, based on your experience, how did you evaluate or measure the success of your student in entrepreneurship project or program?
We're coming up to that. Everyone has watched the videos, right? I sent everybody videos. So I'm going to get, actually, it's interesting. So we'll go over the course objective really quickly. And then you're going to think about how you would assess those 3 videos that you saw. You pick any video you want. You can pick the 2 undergraduate videos, or you can pick the master's level. I want you to assess them. What a great question, right? Lined up with where we're going. Okay. So the course is designed, all my courses are designed to develop real world entrepreneurial skills to help nascent entrepreneurs learn how to develop these ideas into opportunities. And so within the syllabus that I've shared with you these are the learning objectives. Work independently or part as a team, improving their venture, leading and working effectively within a collaborative environment. And so we're accomplishing that by working together with classmates to improve ideas, applying basic management skills to prioritize and optimize workflow. And this is accomplished by sort of assessing their decision-making related to managing the business. And so one of the things that happens often is students are making a little bit of money and spending an awful lot of time. And so, you know, oftentimes students will say their default is, I want to be the low-cost provider. And next thing you know, they're making only a few cents an hour. And then how can you optimize and prioritize to find ways to create value? Evaluate and assess the commercial viability of the concept. Learning objective will be accomplished by getting out of the classroom and developing and testing your assumptions related to real customers. And so these are the formative assessments that we're doing on a weekly basis. Conduct primary, secondary research, assessing and evaluating risks, doing a market analysis. The so what stage of the DIME model is a comparative market analysis at a granular level. Identify a viable business idea. And at the end of the semester, it's okay if it's not viable, but you're able to identify why it's viable or why it's not. Develop the ability to reflect on their learning and demonstrate increased self-efficacy. And so through those discussions that we're going to review in a second, it always ends with how would you do it better? And the examples that we gave were helping each other demonstrate. These are opportunities for them to demonstrate that they understand how to do it better. And then basic understanding of basic financial concepts. And so we do, within the book, we do a cash flow, we do an income statement, but we start out with at a level that's approachable for non-business students. We give them all $1 and they make as much money as they can. At the end of the week, everyone posts how much money they made. And then we calculate the return on investment. And then every week they're keeping track of what they're doing. And at the end, they realize, I have to love this. I had students that were taking accounting students in my class this past semester in my undergraduate. And they said, we learned more of accounting in your class than we did in our accounting class. And so through these formative assessments, what you're doing on a weekly basis is assessing their individual learning journey. And so you set the climate through these probing questions. And so we have already given you that framework of the narrative, the reflective practice, but these are some of the questions. What happened, when and where did it happen? Who was present? Who helped you? What did you and other people do? What were you feeling? What went well? What didn't go well? Why? A lot of the whys. As you get deeper, initially it's who, what, where, when, and then you start getting to the whys. Why did it go well? Why didn't it? And then how? How can you do it better next time? And so through those, what we call in the US, those 5 W's, you end up really being able to facilitate the classroom, but it also becomes the basis of formative assessments. And so a student that initially says, I don't know, and you ask these questions, and you can, through that discussion that we were having earlier, you can see how you would be able to differentiate the formative level of each student. And so in the interaction in the classroom functions through this virtuous cycle. Each student has to come up with an idea. And you might give them a pass for a week or 2, but you're not going to give them a pass for 3 weeks. So I allow students to think for a week And then I want them by the second week to really formulate it. By the third week, they have to get to the action stage. Because as you remember that the construction of knowledge only occurs through these multiple iterations, and you only have them for a short semester. And so it might seem long, but it's really, before you know, it's over. And so you need to develop and test these ideas, these assumptions quickly, before the idea develops too complex. And then ultimately there's this outcome, and then we have these 6 levels of reflection, and then the self-efficacy component. And as a student is outside of the classroom, they engage in the action. They come back to the classroom and talk about what happened. And you, during the reflection, during the discussion, interleave this reflective element. And like I said, at the end, it's always, how will you do it better next time? And so this is the rubric that we're going to share with you. And it lines up with the 3 sort of key concepts of this iterative weekly assignment of learning by doing, learning from others, and learning by working together. You'll go through that, or no? Okay. And then at the end, it becomes this personal entrepreneurial journey where you're assessing their cumulative learning journey that they've done through the course of a semester. Oh, they said, let's go back.
So let's just look at, and I hate doing this, but let's look at the excellent for lack of time, so you know what we're looking for.
No, why don't we just go through the video?
Oh yeah, okay, never mind.
Yeah, we'll just go through the video.
And
You
related to that.
You see, I'm much more about
Action.
so we all have A, B, C, whatever your grading ranking is not really that relevant. You've all seen 3 videos of students' summative submission for the entrepreneurship class, right? Excellent. And so how would you assess it? So who hasn't spoken yet? Mode, Bid, Manzoor?
Muhammad.
I'm calling out the people that haven't spoken yet.
Azrina.
Azuna?
Azrina.
Azrina. Okay, go ahead. Anybody want to step forward while we're waiting? Okay, Azrina, go ahead.
Yeah. Pardon me, Prof. What you asking just now?
I'm asking you, how would you assess those videos that you saw of my students? Did you watch them?
Previously or
This week.
This week. Did you see them? Who's
The
sent out the videos?
Oh, the previous session, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. This one is sort of reflective or what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What I can recall from the previous video that I saw from the previous session is that they are courageous, they are enthusiastic to do the business. And it is quite different with my student. It's obviously different. So from that, what I can get from that is their spirit, or they are courageous to do the business. They are really eager to do that. From that I can see I can use what they share from the video
Okay.
to my student, and they explain. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. So excellent. So one element that you saw in there is that they're courageous and they're doing stuff, right? So that's part of that criteria of the grading criteria, is they actually have to do stuff. And I will tell you that my students are no more courageous than your students. And 10 years ago when I started teaching, my students were not courageous at all because of the way I taught the class. They would submit a business plan that made no sense. I even have a Harvard
I've been
student.
experiencing, Prof, for your information, I've been since 5 years ago, I've been teaching entrepreneurship subject and
Yeah.
entrepreneurship courses in this university. I'm quite, my experience is that I most of majority and most of the class, I experience this student with the passive, most of them are passive one lah. So when I saw your student, so it's quite impressive for me. Okay, also it's all right. I can share what your student do with my student.
Okay, I'm telling you not to share it with your students at all. I refuse to give you authority to share it. My experience is that I'll tell you that all of my students are like that. And these tools will enable all of your students to be like that.
It's your facilitation. It's your facilitation that will get them to do that.
Yeah. That
might be the one reason.
Go ahead.
That might be when you said that just now. That might be one of the reason why my student is quite passive. First thing is because of the facilitation that Lisa just now.
Yeah, no, we're all not. I'll tell you that none of us are very good when we first start.
It's a learning curve.
Who else wants to talk about the assessment that you saw in the videos? How would you assess those videos? My goodness. And if you don't volunteer, who's just going to call on somebody? Or Maine? Go ahead.
Dr. Farha? Or Dr. Ifwan?
So just tell me if you didn't see the video, but if you saw the video, how would you assess it?
I can start if you want.
No, I don't want you to start,
Okay.
Maine.
Dr. Ifwan? Can I call Dr. Ifwan?
Definitely.
Yes, can. Right.
Did you watch the videos?
The brownies video?
Yes.
John students.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So about the brownies videos, what I'm have learned so far, right? Because they are using the critical thinking and the growing mindsets, because they are starting to learn the mistake they have been done before previously, and then they are keep moving, changing creatively by doing some trial and error to execute something that able to move or something that able to make their product in profitable environments, right? So meaning to say, they are learning from mistake, and then apart from that, they are keep on reflecting themselves about what they should do for the next step. Meaning to say, they are need to focus about what they need to do for the next level. Right. So that's what I'm learning about the videos.
For reflection, they can.
Okay, so you ended up talking about learning by doing, mistakes, iteration, trial and error. But what grade are you going to give them?
The grade, all right. So, meaning the grade for conducting their business, or what?
For conducting for the course.
All right. Okay. For me, if in terms of the process and the activity, of course, I will grade them for an A, because they are improving. They keep on improving, and then do not static from what they are doing in the same way. So that's what I'm
perfect. Yeah. So you've identified the individual learning that they've accomplished, their learning journey, right? And they talk a little bit about what they were like at the beginning, and you see their different iterations through the semester.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And then apart from that, I also learn how they are discussed among their group, and then to experiment their product, right? So that's also part of the learning process they are doing that.
Yeah. So to me, when I look at that video, it's exemplary of what we want freshman entrepreneurship students to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there was no predetermined outcome. I had no idea where they were going to end up, and neither did they.
Yeah.
And I like it because they made multiple iterations. Perfect. So who wants to take the next video? So we've done the brownie one. You see how it's easy when you go first. It's harder when you go second. So who's going to take the second video? And Nick, is your hand up, or are you just drinking tea?
Muhammad.
Is there also Mohammed? Or is it? I'm like,
Yeah, Muhammad bin Mahmud.
I watched.
Did you watch the
I
video?
watched both of the videos a few weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
I even went to their Instagram to look what actually they're doing. I think it's very interesting, especially in terms of the way they deliver the content. It's so relaxed. It's not. It's not what I say. It's not too formal. I can feel that they are very comfortable doing that presentation because it was not very structured, right? So they just go with the flow, and then it's very nice to see that. Yeah.
But what did they learn? Like, what did they learn? We're talking about the succulent business, right? Or the brownie
the succulent
one.
business.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what did they learn? Think as you reflect on the video. What did they learn about entrepreneurship in their journey in the course?
Yeah, I think it's about the market, because they change the product, right? At first they started doing succulent, and then they changed to cloth or something. Yeah. So they keep changing and trying.
So there was the iterative process. Does anyone want to talk about what they did about their marketing? What did they learn about marketing?
Yeah, maybe someone else can add on that.
Yeah, who can add? Why don't you tell me who do you think knows the answer to that?
Pick somebody.
Mahmoud, you pick somebody.
Muhammad, please pick.
Yeah,
Pick one.
I can see Dr. Satish here, so maybe Dr. Satish can help. Thank you.
So if you recall on the marketing, do you guys, anybody recall that slide where they showed their various logos?
Yeah.
So what did when you look at those various logos, what do you see? How would you assess that part of it?
Maybe someone else can try first, because I've tried to recall. But
okay, anybody else?
That marketing part.
Yeah, and so I'll just sort of remind you, when you look at that slide, they showed their original logo, which was really primitive, and then their second logo, which was a little more refined, and then they showed their third logo, which had a catchy name, which was Suck Shop, remember? Which is a play on words in the US, because suck is something that's also short for succulent. And so it's a play on words. So the logos got, from a marketing professor's point of view, the logos got much more simple, but also conveyed the message much more effectively. So they're sort of played with the logo in that one little part of the thing, but it shows you that they're growing in their understanding of marketing and branding, creating this brand for themselves. So the message really conveyed something that resonated with students. And what's interesting about their business, this is what's interesting about the video, is they switched because the succulent business became too easy for them, right? They were like, we're doing so well in succulents, and we want to challenge ourselves to do something bigger. And so for those students, they took their business, they abandoned what was easy and went and had confidence to try something else, which was the clothing business. And so that growth is like, they felt comfortable enough. They could have stayed with the succulent business all semester and done well. But they wanted to challenge themselves, so they went to a different level. Again, felt comfortable. They weren't concerned about the A anymore. right? They were like, I really want to learn more, and so we're going to take it to another level. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at their financing model, right, for the succulent business, it's phenomenal. Customer finance. They pre-sold their product, used the money from the sale of students. Students all gave them $5. They used the money to pre-order a group of succulents, right? And so, really, from a business point of view, really strong understanding, but entrepreneurial point of view, sort of an excellent demonstration of this journey that they went on.
Okay. From an educational point of view, I want to point out to all of you that, yes, this is their final summative, cumulative assessment that you saw in a video that they put together. Now I want you to think back the classroom, the experiential classroom using the DIME model that they went through with their peers to get to that video. So the initial class started very quiet. Everybody had an idea. You know, some had grandiose ideas that be brought down to a granular level. That's the great thing about the DIME process. It really enables students to bring something down to the time component that they can do in a semester.
In a week.
In a week. And then they can build on that with their peers. So I just want you not to miss out on the thinking that went on before. Okay.
What's happening underneath? Does anyone want to talk about the master's level video? Or any other thoughts on the videos that you want to discuss about the assessments of how you would assess that video? Because we're looking at assessments. So we've talked about the mistakes, the changing, the courage, the actions, the trial and error, and the personal journey. And to me, those are strong buckets that you can easily assess individual learning. But anything else popped up that you want to talk about related to those videos? I'm not sharing that.
No, I was going to go back to the formative assessment. It would go through.
Okay.
Now that
Yeah. Okay. So let's share the screen again.
Let the student come up with the.
So now we're going to look at the formative assessments. Go ahead.
So we go across we can look at the excellent, just for a best case scenario, for time's sake for us here in this workshop. So learning by doing the weekly assignments, this is what you would hope to see as the top. So works 5 or more hours on their venture, provides clear and convincing details of how the time was spent. So the ideal is they're optimizing to be self-directed learning, okay?
Go to others.
And so the next component we're looking at for the DIME process is learning from others and weekly assignments. Demonstrates excellent incorporation of the feedback into improving the revised idea with reduction, analysis, and integration. Now, this is what was happening, what you were just talking about, all the things that you heard, mistakes, changing, trial and error, persistence. I wrote down some more. They're courageous in doing it. So that's all happening here. Okay. And then the final component, learning by working together, weekly assignment. So it provides excellent feedback into improving the idea of other students, including excellent reflection, analysis, and integration of ongoing idea development. So these components are happening regularly in the classroom. You're giving time for this to happen and you're seeing it evolve. But some students fit in different.
And so that's sort of the excellent component. A number of your students are going to come in with a lot of fear. And we talked about those assessments that you need to set those clear expectations. And the clear expectation is that they spend the time trying to solve the problem. So you will have students that come in and when they present, they are not providing evidence. So I'm at poor here, that they haven't worked on their business at all. Minimal details of how this time was spent. So they're not really convincing. They're not presenting a convincing presentation that they actually spent the time. That they're not incorporating the feedback to make it better. And this is the student that doesn't provide feedback that we were talking about, that's struggling. Some of them will struggle, but by engaging, you're able to bring that out in them. And then someone that's getting a fair grade is they're working a bit on their business, but they're providing limited details of what they're actually doing. They incorporate limited, so very little. There's evidence that they're thinking about what other people are saying, but not really. And so if you initially give, I have my grade, if somebody fails initially and they come and see you. So in other words, the student comes in and you give them an F because they didn't work on their business, and that is the signal to them that they're doing poorly. So you need to do that early. And then when they come in to see you, they're going to say, what do I need to do to get an A? And the focus is you need to work on your idea, or you need to convince me that you're working on your idea. And so it's not about you need to have a successful business next week. You just need to be working on it. And that's the paradigm shift that you're trying to get in the students, in that to do well in the class, they just need to actually work on their idea. And so over time, as you focus on the time that they need to spend, their engagement goes up and they move up quite easily, quite readily. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. They move up quite readily. Inadvertently, they move up quite readily up the grading rubric because they understand their assessment is based on it. And then the second thing that happens, which is quite powerful, is that their engagement goes up because the quality of the experiences that they have, they are able to share with other students. Part of that trepidation and fear that they have in your classroom is what we call the imposter syndrome, in that they don't feel they belong. I'm in an entrepreneurship class and I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm in an entrepreneurship class and this other student is such a better entrepreneur. They made $1,000 and I can't even come up with an idea. And what you're trying to do is move them away of comparing themselves and move them away from thinking that they're an imposter. They're there to become more entrepreneurial in your role. And it's quite simple. Focus. Your role is quite simple. Your role is to ensure that they spend the time developing their idea. And you need to trust the process that this model will bring out this entrepreneurial spirit in these students that you are all saying does not exist. I have taught all over the world, and I've never been in a community that at the end of it, I'm not amazed by their entrepreneurial ability. And so as you're doing these weekly assessments, you got to give feedback. You've got to be transparent about why they got a bad grade and show them a roadmap to get a better grade. And the roadmap is, if you want to get an A, you just need to work 5 hours on your business and start with the action. And then after they've done the action, then you start focusing on that, developing the personal journey. But getting them to do that action for a number of students will be challenging. For other students, you'll have to rein them in. They're like off and running, and you won't have to worry about that action component. And you need to balance that climate in the classroom so that the students that are self-directed at the beginning don't dominate the discussion. Through these cumulative formative assessments, your summative assessment becomes quite easy because you're doing it on a weekly basis and you have a good sense and you're actively engaging students in trying to get them out. And there's a point that in May will tell you that in our Harvard class, we do it a couple of times, and then we give them a couple of opportunities. And I mean, this is more of a master's level, but there's a point that they're not going to engage. And that student, it's not the right time for them to take this class. But at the undergraduate level, that happens very, very minimally. And even at the graduate level, it happens very, very minimally. And then at the end, you're able to, they are organizing their learning journey. I have them do a video and a written assignment. And I also have them do what I call the grand finale. So a last visual representation. So it's 3 elements. I only sent you the video. And so what you are assessing is, have they moved from this passive learner to a self-directed and, you know, self-determined? Are they identifying those elements that they lack that they need to fill?
Yeah.
And so what happens as the semester goes along is that certain groups of students are working on deeper problems. Other students are working on more sort of basic problems. And so you watch the video and you're like, okay, did it demonstrate excellent initiative, leadership, quality of work? Did they add value throughout the semester to their idea? And were they responsive to this feedback? And were they excellent, reliable, respected members of class? And so as you go through this, you know, the assessment becomes quite easy, because you can see from their videos of how they've sort of mastered at an introductory level this entrepreneurial learning journey that we're looking where we want in our students. And even though these businesses are still at the granular level, one thing that has happened, and I had research to show that it's effective. But the second thing is that at the end of the semester, students will come back and talk to you. I just got an email from a student from last year who wants to meet with me on Zoom to talk about how she's developed her idea. And so you'll end up with this. Students, after the semester is over, will continue their businesses, right? And that's really, that shows you that you've been ignited in them. They're taking the class because they're interested. And it'll go back to my initial point, right? Is when I first started teaching, the aha moment was when I realized that it was my teaching that was detrimental to the entrepreneurial learning. And when I realized that, that was my big aha moment. In that students left my class less entrepreneurial than they entered, less interested in entrepreneurship. Then I started reflecting on what I was doing, and I realized that I need to get out of their way. They come into the class because, well, some of them come in because it fits their schedule. Some of them come in because they want an easy A. Some of them, but a large majority, 85% of them come in because they are exploring entrepreneurship. And you want them to enable them feel safe exploring entrepreneurship, this you know, highly topical but really ambiguous topic. And that's your role, is to ignite this growth mindset in them as they move forward with their entrepreneurial journey. And then the rewards are phenomenal. At the end of the semester, longer term. Yeah. Any questions, comments, compliments to Maim and Lisa? And then we can outline sort of where we're moving forward. But sort of any questions or comments on the assessment part of it first?
If I can.
Yeah, now you can come in. Maim.
I can come in now. Okay. So on the assessment or on the reflections, just as a personal note, coming from the student's point of view, because I did take this class before I became a teaching assistant, and it is terrifying to put yourself out there knowing that you might have not come up with the right solution. But in the end, once you've actually put yourself out there, once the students put themselves out there, and the rest of the other students are giving feedback and they're saying, well, have you tried? Did you consider, reaching out to this person? I have somebody that you could reach out to for, X, Y, and Z. They start to kind of play off you, and the student ends up doing like a reflection exercise later about themselves. What I could have done now that I've learned. And I thought, as a student, I thought that was so powerful, so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so Maine took and so those two key points are important. A, you have to realize the terror they have. And we call this the sanitized version is zone of proximal knowledge, but paralyzed with fear is really because A, they want to get an A, and B, even they're interested, but they really don't know how to proceed. And those two elements are playing against you in the classroom. And I spend an awful lot of my time holding hands, figuratively, and tell them you need to just try it. And then the assessment component is kind of the stick. It's the wake up call where the freshman student gets an F or a D or a C in their grade, and it's like, oh. And they'll come in. If you give them what I do is that the weekly assignments are only worth about 10% of the year, or 15%, 1% per assignment, right? But what it does is that's the only thing that appears on their learning management system at that point, right? And so the only grade that they have from your class is a D-, and that will bring them into your classroom, into your office to talk to you, or that will get them to send an email. And if they don't, you have to reach out to them because you don't want them to go into a shell and hide. You want to engage them, and you can engage them in the classroom. You call them after, you say, let me talk to you. It's not a long discussion. It's like, you got a bad grade. This is what you need to do to get a better grade. Actually work on your business idea. Like, what's your idea? Why is it important? And go work on it. What's preventing you from doing it? And you ask those questions, and then you get a verbal commitment from them that they're going to do it. Can you do that? And they'll say, because when you break it down to a 5-hour task, I don't know anybody that won't do it. Like, I understand, if you're like, over the next 600 hours, you need to do a business plan. Why? But everyone's going to agree to, between now and next week, I want to pass this class, and between now and next week, I'm going to work on my idea for 5 hours. And then you as a faculty are like, it doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. I just want you to take your best attempt to be successful. And if you do that, I guarantee you will get the grade based on the rubric. You will get an A for that, or a B+ for that assignment, whatever your criteria is. And that gives them a challenging but achievable goal. And that's critical. As you're assessing them, you need to give them challenging but achievable goals. And for the students that are doing well, you have to keep raising the bar, right? You're not going to raise it beyond it, but you don't want them to coast through the semester, right? So that the succulent business, they were going through it, and they were like, we were talking, and they were like, well, I can keep increasing the quantity. But they were kind of bored with it. And so because they were bored with it, I said, let's do something else. And I didn't tell them what the else was. I said, you guys do something else. And they thought about it, and they came up with the business CHOP 92 or whatever, 90, whatever it was, CHOP business, which was the craziest thing I'd heard of. Okay. So fear. You have fear. The students have fear. I don't have fear. Maine doesn't have fear. Lisa doesn't have fear, because we've seen the fear in your eyes before.
I just want to add a final comment for my own. I know Maine spoke as a student. For myself, coming in this from as an entrepreneur with experiential background, and then coming in as an educator trying to figure this out, one thing you want to remember is that what's my course doing? What is happening? So you want to, three things. I was taught by someone, a great mentor of mine in education, who said, what's the meaning that's happening in your class? What is the student, what is the learning knowledge that's happening that's creating meaning for them? Number two, how relatable is this course, the actions that are happening in this class, to the real world for the student? And number three, what kind of impact have the students received from all this knowledge and all this experience in the classroom that they can take to the real world? So it's being, what's the meaning? How is it connected and relatable? And how is it impacting real world? And so you're taking that informal working that happens with real entrepreneurs, you're bringing it into a controlled action-based experiential classroom, and you're facilitating it.
But then they can see that then they see the value in outside of the classroom.
And all the while, the greatest part is that the students are conducting their own learning and their own knowledge, all because you're able to facilitate that for them. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. That's it. Oh yeah, and I also could see all the growth, and everybody's talking, especially this week, a lot of changes in mindset, which I think is really remarkable, especially we're doing this so long distance. Even the words you're using were really resounding with me and saying, okay, this is going to happen, and these students are going to be changed because you're understanding the value.
Thank you very much, Professor John. John, I have a question here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go
John.
ahead.
Yeah, because I saw in your slide just now you were telling about removing a mentor and case study. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. Yes,
Right.
definitely remove the mentors and the case studies.
Yeah. My question is actually a couple of weeks ago, I was working with my colleague, right, to write something like a best entrepreneurial practices, and we were looking at the top entrepreneurial universities like Dobson, Harvard, Houston universities, and so on. They have used mentors and case studies a lot as a strategist to create an entrepreneur. But
yeah, and so they've used mentors a lot.
Leadership program,
so let me just program. Yeah, so part of that is that when I go over there, we're going to do a workshop on creating the ecosystem.
Okay.
Right, and so I'm just going to stop sharing here again for a second. And so those things are suitable for the ecosystem. And so mentoring programs are effective when you're taking the students that are self-determined and they need coaching and mentoring. What I'm saying is that in the classroom, in this experiential classroom, in their first experience in entrepreneurship, you want to avoid the hero narrative. You want to avoid the mentor who has all the knowledge, who's imparting it to the students. You want the students to construct their own knowledge so that when they get to the mentoring situation or to the mentoring activity, the co-curricular programming that you have that's mentoring, the students have enough of an experience that that relationship is valuable. Okay. If you put a student that isn't ready in a mentoring relationship, the mentor is disappointed because the student doesn't know the basics, and the student doesn't get a lot out of it because they don't have, we'll just say they don't have the experience, or they don't really have a viable business that they're trying to develop. And so I've seen schools do it too soon in the student's learning journey. So we map it out when we're over there. We have the ecosystem mapped out, and there's elements where you bring in mentoring, coaching through these co-curricular, the maker spaces, the accelerators. But that's for that small group of students. It's not designed for everybody. This course, what we're talking about now, is this introductory to entrepreneurship foundational course that you want to increase the catchment. And what you're doing is that you're igniting and empowering more students so that when you have your mentoring and you have your incubator, accelerator spaces, they can excel and you have a waiting list to get in, right?
They have the foundation they need to be there.
Of quality people versus people who aren't ready for those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But what about the case studies?
Again, it's not when you want students to construct knowledge of entrepreneurship, you don't want a case study on what Steve Jobs did or what Bill Gates did. And the reason is that what students often take away from those is everything they're not. Or they have this, they're attempting to recreate, imitate, if you want to imitate Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, is you want to quit school, backpack in India, and live in your parents' basement, right? And so, but I mean, I'm just being in jest, right? But the point is that their context isn't the context that you have with your students. And the access to knowledge, skills, and ability and resources that they have are not the same to your students. And to me, what's important is the context. You want students to develop entrepreneurship suitable for their context. And relating a story about how it functions in the US, though interesting, it doesn't help the learning journey as the students are starting out, right? I'm not saying that you can't have case studies in sort of higher level courses, but we're at this point right now creating this foundational component, and you want this foundational component to be as much about the individual student and their agency to become the change agent, and much less about you, and much less about Alibaba
yeah,
right? Like Alibaba's a fantastic story, but
your
student, your student is not the next Alibaba.
True.
He is the next, University of Malaysia, Kelantan entrepreneur student, and that's the context that they reside in.
Yeah. Okay.
Follow up, or we're good?
Prof, I just want to ask you something. Just now you said that to develop the student entrepreneur development in their context, they shouldn't, or they have to avoid the mentoring or whatsoever, not right. So from my point of view, is that when the student want to develop the entrepreneurship development in their context, it does make sense to the reality, and the student have to know the reality because they want to do the business, right? So when they want to do the business, they have to make sense in the reality, what the reality want, what the reality needs is actually. So that's why we need the mentoring. That's why we need the guest lecture from the entrepreneur. Is that?
No, I agree with everything what you said except for the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Everything what you said is perfect except for the conclusion. And the reason is that we want them to construct entrepreneurship in their context. And having a successful business owner from Malaysia come in to your class is even though ethnically they're the same, religiously they're the same, they came up from the context is different. They have already become successful, and it becomes the hero narrative. And what you want is your group of students to develop their own entrepreneurship and not think that they're being compared against somebody who is a successful person. What I'm saying is that when you get them to actually running a real business, and they've done that for a few semesters, and part of what we're doing when we go over there is helping you design the ecosystem. At that point, those students that come back to you and like, I'm running my business and I have so much, I don't have time. I have customers coming to me and I don't have time. What do I do? You're like, you go to the mentoring program. We've developed a mentoring program for you. And that helps them. They're getting to the point that they're running a real business, I guess is my bigger point, is that even if it's still micro and they're in school, they need the mentoring. Whereas at the more the nascent, the infancy element, they need to have those concrete experiences, success and failures on their own. And there's no, as far as I know, I don't know any research that shows that there's no substitute for that. And you want individual agency. And so I'm not saying don't bring a guest speaker to talk to the whole university. That's fine. And I'm not saying don't have a mentoring program. That's fine. I'm saying at a foundational entrepreneurship class, that is the wrong time to do those things for those students.
One of the pitfalls about mentoring, if you've worked with students long enough, you'll hear students will come back to you because you're their professor, right? And so they'll come back and tell you, well, my mentor said this and this and this work really well. And one of the benefits of you as a professor is you have some all-around knowledge of various different aspects where the mentor is very formed in a specific area. So the timing of when the mentor is used is important, because you'll get a student who'll come, they have their idea, they're bouncing along, it's going really well, they go meet with their mentor, and then all of a sudden pivot. But they're pivoting because of something the mentor told them within the context of the mentor's learning. You have to remember that the learning is the entrepreneur's journey. So sometimes you'll get, and then they pivot to go to what the mentor is telling them, and they've gone along, and it might be 3 months or whatever, 6 months even, depending what type of program they're in at the university. And all of a sudden they realize, I am so far away from where I wanted to be with my idea because the mentor said this and this. So it has to be the entrepreneur's learning journey. And then the entrepreneur has to unlearn, basically, really and truly unlearn things that a mentor told them that were not within the social context, did not fit the context of the learning. So the mentor has its place. I've used mentor. There's definitely a place for mentor, but timing is really, really important.
Okay.
More questions?
Any other questions?
We are also reachable when people have other questions. You can reach out, please.
And so what we've looked at is we've introduced sort of the DIME methodology. We've explored learning to learn, sort of unpacked and really discussed how entrepreneurs learn to be entrepreneurs. One of the modules looked on the reflective learning, the facilitation and creation of knowledge, and then ultimately sort of how to assess that learning journey. What we're going to do between sort of now and the site visit is I'm going to share with anyone that's teaching the entrepreneurship. We're going to start the research process. I know your classes don't start till October, so we'll translate the research instrument into Malay. And then we also have the workbook that we're going to translate between now and the next semester. We're tentatively planning a site visit in January to get you in between semesters and get faculty ready to sort of teach this problem-based class. And then during that point, we'll also do a deeper dive into these elements of how people learn. Oh, I thought I had okay. So that's sort of our roadmap moving forward of where we're going to be. So between now and January, we'll do the research, start the survey instrument for anyone that's teaching entrepreneurship, translate the book, that will be sort of the foundation for your introductory course. When we go for the site visit, we'll do the deeper dive, and we'll actually be doing more of the master's level learning material. So we'll introduce all those tools that we do at the capstone of the undergrad, and also sort of the master's level element. Yeah, so that's sort of, we're looking forward to it. I think we're off to a strong start. Any questions or comments as we end this module?
I just want to tell them it's there. They can use it for their classes. Pull up the.
No. Okay.
I have a comment. I want to thank you all for participating. I just want to echo what both professors were saying, is that yes, it's terrifying as a student. And so as you're learning this, kind of putting yourself in the student's seat, you know, for the first time that they're hearing that, I appreciate all of you for talking. Seriously, I know it's hard. I know it's hard, and you all did a great job. Talking about it helps everybody learn, because even if you're wrong, somebody else can help you figure out what was wrong before you go down too far a line.
Yeah, and there's often a nugget of right in your wrong, right? And,
mm-hmm.
and so you're not as wrong as you think you are. And the only really wrong in problem-based learning is not doing the action. And it's easy to get them to do the action if you assess effectively and transparently, because then they understand that element about, oh, I really have to do the action. And my grade is okay if I just do it if it doesn't work out. And so those are the two elements of the assessment, because that's like we said at the beginning of the workshop today, is that's the first thing the student thinks about. And we have to understand that that's the first thing the student thinks about and address it. And unfortunately for faculty, assessment is the last thing we think about. And so we need to help them understand, help them answer that first question that they're asking as they enter the classroom. So, perfect.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed learning and listening to you all.
So who's going to stay on after? I just want to talk to her for a second.
Okay.
And then everybody else, we'll see you in online, and then we're going to see you. Yeah, we'll see you online between now and then. We'll have a couple more sessions before.
Sure.
Thank you, Prof, for all knowledge that you have.
We actually visit in person.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you so much. See you again on January.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
See you next year.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. See you for the next class. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.